The Galactic Combat Academy was not built for humans. It stood tall on the cold volcanic moon of Grake 4, forged by centuries of war and blood, where only the strongest species trained to become elite defenders of the galaxy. So when Lyra Keene, a human cadet from Earth, arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and calm eyes, the Academy fell silent. The other cadets, some with scales, tusks, and exoskeletons, stared at her as if a child had walked into a battlefield. They had heard of Earth, of course a death world with wild oceans and beasts that hunted with intelligence, but none believed its people could match the strength or discipline of the galactic elite. From the moment training began, Lyra was treated as a mistake. Her drills were harder. Her food rations were smaller. Her instructor, Thalvor, a brutal reptilian with scars older than her planet's space program, made her a target. He didn't shout, he simply added more weight, more pain, and more impossible tasks. Yet Lyra said nothing. Every time she fell, she stood again. Every time she failed, she studied longer at night. She wasn't just surviving, she was observing. And deep behind her quiet stare, something cold and patient waited to strike. Weeks passed, and Lyra became something strange in the eyes of the other cadets, not strong, not weak, but unreadable. She never reacted, never raised her voice, never showed anger. Even when she was bruised, mocked, or pushed to the edge, she responded with silence and calculation. But Instructor Thalvor wanted more than quiet resistance, he wanted her to break. During a sparring session in front of the full training division, he stopped the match and entered the circle himself. Without a word, he lunged and drove his elbow straight into Lyra's face, crushing her nose with a sharp, brutal snap. Blood poured instantly, and the room froze. The alien cadets, trained in violence, had never seen such cruelty used to prove a lesson. Thalvor looked down at her and growled, "Pain reveals truth." Everyone expected her to collapse. Instead, Lyra staggered back, wiped the blood with her sleeve, and stared straight into his eyes, not with fear, but with something colder. Her voice, soft but steady, cut through the silence. "Then I'll show you mine." It wasn't defiance. It was a warning. One that didn't come from pride, but from something ancient, something Earth had buried in every human who learned to survive by remembering. The next morning, the training hall felt different. Whispers moved like wind between cadets as Lyra stepped into the arena again, her face swollen but her eyes sharp. Thalvor stood waiting, his massive arms crossed, expecting her to back down. But she entered the circle with steady steps and no hesitation. He attacked first, using the same aggressive style that had crushed dozens before her, but Lyra was not the same cadet from yesterday. She moved with precision, slipping past his swings like she had studied them 100 times. Then, in one perfect moment, she twisted around his charge, locked his arm, and drove her knee into his elbow with exact force. The sound of bone snapping echoed like a gunshot through the hall. Thalvor dropped, not roaring in pain, but stunned. Silence followed, long and uneasy. Lyra didn't celebrate, didn't smile. She simply stood over him and said, "Lesson learned." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried power. Cadets who once laughed now stared in awe. She didn't just defeat a legend, she did it with control. From that moment, her name traveled faster than orders. She was no longer a curiosity. She was a message, and the galaxy had just started listening. Lyra's silent victory spread through the academy faster than fire and dry air. Every corner, from the weight rooms to the weapon pits, echoed with her name. Some cadets admired her, others feared her, but none ignored her now. The recording of her duel with Thalvor was reviewed in private by commanders and instructors across the sector. They watched the moment she moved, the calm in her eyes, the cold precision in her strike, and most of all, the control she showed after breaking his arm. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was a lesson. Thalvor, now healing in a medical pod, refused to report her or press charges. In fact, when asked about the incident, he did something no one expected. He requested Lyra as a guest instructor in his own advanced tactics class. When questioned, he replied, "Because she teaches what I forgot. You cannot crush what adapts." From that day, Cadets stopped seeing Lyra as a human. They started seeing her as a warrior. Her drills were no longer mocked, but watched. Her movements were copied. Species that once looked down on her now lowered their heads when she passed. She had not just earned respect, she had planted fear, not through violence, but through perfect restraint. Even the high command took notice. They whispered about Earth, about what kind of people trained someone like her. Was she an exception or just the beginning? That question traveled across the stars, stirring worry in those who once laughed at humanity. And in quiet corners of the galaxy, strategists began adjusting their simulations, wondering what would happen if more like Lyra came through the gates. The Academy didn't just change its opinion, it changed its expectations. Because now, everyone knew humans weren't to be tested lightly. When Lyra Keene walked across the graduation stage of the Galactic Combat Academy, she didn't smile, wave, or pause for applause. She simply accepted the medal and moved on, just as she had trained, quiet, focused, and dangerous. But the real noise was not in the hall. It was in the stars. Across military outposts and command centers, her name was now spoken with caution. Intelligence reports began tagging her files, not because of what she did, but because of what she represented. She was one human, alone, surrounded by elite alien warriors, and she had not only survived, but forced the Academy to change. Her duel with Thalvar became required viewing in some officer schools. Galactic simulations were rewritten to consider human unpredictability, and political leaders questioned whether Earth should be invited deeper into the Council or kept out entirely. Meanwhile, Lyra returned to Earth unnoticed by the public but welcomed as a silent hero among her own. She never asked for attention, but attention found her anyway. Other nations sent requests for training. Some species even asked to exchange cadets, hoping to understand the human mindset. But no one ever truly understood what gave her strength. It wasn't brute force or high technology. It was something older, something Earth had forged through centuries of hardship, the ability to endure, to wait, and to strike only when it mattered. Lyra had broken no rules, used no special weapons, yet the point she made echoed across the galaxy louder than any war. The Academy now taught alien recruits a simple rule: if you face a human and they say nothing, prepare for something. And in the cold reaches of space, where fear and power shaped empires, one quiet human had shifted the balance with a broken nose, a snapped arm, and a will that didn't break.